While everybody's looking at multifamily, thinking, hey, this is the ultimate asset class, I'm looking at single family. It's everything. All these single families are in front of you. There's more abundant. They're everywhere. Your leverage are better. And people are overlooking all the opportunities you can have with single family. You can have midterm rental. You can have short-term rental. You can have assisted living facilities. You can have sober homes. You can have rehab centers. I mean, it's limitless at this point. As the more I explore this whole co-living model, the more I realize I can identify like a handful of different exits.
Welcome to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast with your hosts, Charlie Cameron and Alex Schlow. This is your go-to show for cutting-edge insights from industry leaders in residential assisted living.
Whether you're ready to launch your own assisted living business or looking to invest in this fast-growing, high-impact sector, we are here to equip you with the tools, strategies, and confidence you need to succeed. Get ready to ride the silver tsunami and change the future of senior care. Now on to today's show.
Welcome back to today's episode of the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Cameron, and today we are joined by the incredible Alvin Uy. Really excited to have you today, Alvin. How are we doing?
Good. I'm so glad to be invited to your podcast, man. I talked to Alex a few days ago and he said, hey, why don't you go and be on our podcast? So I'm like, I'm here. Thank you.
We're stoked to have you. You have an incredible real estate background. You've been on Shark Tank. I mean, we're gonna touch on a lot of interesting, different things today than what our listeners are used to. And I think it'll be a good change of pace. So with that, if you would give us a brief introduction to you and kind of where you are right now, and then we'll jump back to where it all started.
Yeah. So right now, I'm a full-time real estate investor here in Los Angeles. I am trying to basically prove that there's a way to 10x your cash flow with 10x less real estate. That's sort of my challenge right now. A lot of people in real estate are on this path to acquire as many units as they can because they think the more units, the more cash flow. In my opinion, like just from my 21 years of experience, I've realized that like the more units, the more headaches. And I feel like if there's a path to just having less units and higher cash flow with just so many few, units, I think that's the best path that I want to do. And that's how I stumbled upon residential assisted living facilities, only because my mom has Alzheimer's and I'm already her caregiver. And as I was looking into the space, looking for housing for her, because at some point I thought I couldn't take care of her, I just saw opportunity and also opportunities to help people and build real estate. And there's, as they say, there's a silver tsunami coming. So I felt like, this is the beginnings of it and I want to be on that ride.
What is it about us entrepreneurs that are like, if it doesn't exist, I'm just going to go build it? What's up with that? What's wrong with us?
It's in our DNA, challenges come in our way. And, if those who are bold enough to try it, we'll try it. And, that's sort of been my experience. I just want to keep swinging at the bat, man.
Dude, and you said something that's super important. I think we should reiterate for the listeners, like, it's not about the number of units. And I see so many entrepreneurs out there being like beating their chest on, I have 1,000 units. Well, no, you have 3% of 1,000 units and buying 1,000 units at a 5% cap rate is only going to create a ton of stress, right? Because you have thin margins. You got to keep it running perfect or all of a sudden you're under and you can't pay investors and it's not going well. But if you compare that to one residential assisted living home done correctly, you can cash flow 6 figures on that. And when I say correctly, I mean, you have to have the right number of residents. It has to be a really nice home. It has to have, care of the residents as the number one priority. Staff as very closely the next priority. And by doing so, everything else will take care of itself. So I totally agree. And I think you will achieve your goal, knowing what I know about you, of the 10x cash flow at 10x less real estate through this industry. So tell us a little bit about how you got into entrepreneurship, how you got into real estate in the first place.
Ooh, I mean, that's a long story. How much time do we have here? Well, let me just kind of see how far I can take this. But, I'm an immigrant. My parents came here when I was 12, basically lost. I wouldn't say lost, but spent all their money because, there's 5 of us kids when they brought us here. They didn't know what they were getting into. They just kind of came to the US with 5 kids, didn't have a job, didn't have, basically credit history, no job history, couldn't find work. And next thing you know, we're like down on our luck. And we ended up jumping from house to house with her friends. And didn't get very far with that because there's 7 of us.
How old were you at the time?
I was 12 at the time, and I'm the eldest son. And my youngest sibling was, my youngest sibling, she was 10 years younger than me. So she was only 2. And my parents could barely speak English, and they were trying to figure things out. And next thing you know, we ended up at I think a 400 square foot apartment in the middle of Los Angeles, just really bad area. We slept on the floor for like years. No bed. Parents didn't know how to keep us kind of alive. But, that was my recollection of what wealth was, and also made me realize like, well, they came here for a reason, thinking that it's the land of opportunity, but they never really figured out how to take advantage of that. But at that young age, I've identified, wow, let me, if this is the case, US is the land of opportunity. Let's see where that goes. So I sort of, dabbled around in high school trying to figure things out. And, I've been slightly more on the entrepreneurial side, although my parents thought, just get good grades, go to school, get a job, the normal kind of path. And, I tried to do that. Went to school for engineering initially, for aerospace engineering. Took 3 years of that. Yeah, it took 3 years of that. And this is back in the early 90s. And like aerospace wasn't a good job. Like they weren't paying us much at the time. They were closing down some of the businesses for real estate at the time. For aerospace at the time. And, I was in college and I went to one of these facilities and I realized I don't want to do that job. I saw a guy, he's, wearing a suit at 8:00 at night in his cubicle, and he looked miserable. And I'm like, I don't want to be an engineer. And I decided then, like, this is not the right path for me. And I dropped out of college, quickly realized, wow, what am I going to do next? That's about the time I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as a lot of real estate entrepreneurs and a lot of entrepreneurs have probably read and, inspired them. And so that's exactly what happened to me. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant. And I quickly decided, okay, I want to be an investor. I want to be a businessman. And so I charted my path to be a businessman. Got my first job as a designer because I've always been creative. Got my first job as a designer for an agency and told my boss, hey, if you hire me, I'm taking a pay cut, but one day I'm going to be running this place for you. And somehow I got that job. And
That's
about 9 years. Well, I read somewhere that if you say something like that, there's a big chance you might get hired because, and I just took a chance. I did that. And, next thing you know, I was actually running the company at one point. And, I decided this is the path for me. So around that time is when I decided, wow, okay, I'm starting to make money now. Let me learn how to flip houses, bought some property. And this is back in 2003. And, fast forward a bit later, that company shut down and I kind of ventured on my own. So I started my own agency. So I had a full design agency from branding, entertainment branding, to packaging, to design, product development. And that's about the time like I got into developing toys for like all the toy companies. I was actually coming up with ideas for them. And that's about the time I developed a product called Soap Socks, which is a invention that I did. And we launched that concept in 2015. So I was on Shark Tank for that. That's, and just to make the long story short, we got $1 million offer to buy us out and we decided not to take it. We ended up walking away from it. Still have that business. I'm not running. It was actually 3. It was Robert Hershevek, Lori Gannier, and also Damon John.
Okay.
Yeah, they all made offers and one of them offered to buy us out completely for $1 million. And we're like, nope, we're not selling. Yeah. And so still have that company. I don't run it day to day now. That business is really just more of an equity play for me. If we kind of get it to scale, sell it, and that's exit. But yeah, so fast forward now. So I in 2020, what happened was COVID happened and everything in Los Angeles shut down. And so all my design agency business shut down. My toy company business was on pause because all our product was manufactured in China. So everything was stuck in the port. We had no inventory. We had a lot of canceled orders. Kind of messed us up a little bit, to be honest. And these are like, we had orders from like Target, Walmart, all those. We ended up dropping all those. But that's also about the time I realized, wow, what's keeping me afloat right now? And it's because I've been building my real estate portfolio for all this time. And that's when I realized I was financially free in that sense of like, hey, my debt's paid. I'm still staying afloat. And at the time, I discovered ADUs in Los Angeles. I was building ADUs ground up because at that point, too, I've been flipping houses. I've been building my real estate company on the side, construction. I've learned all that skill. And I quickly realized that like, wow, my end game was real estate, and I've kept on putting my mind thinking like, hey, one day I'll do that. And 2020 made me realize, well, that one day is now. So I just jumped ship and I said, I pivoted. I closed some of my other companies. I said, I'm just going to focus 100% real estate. And yeah, so that's where I'm now. I'm doing micro development here. I'm flipping homes, high-end luxury. I'm building high-end luxury spoke homes, expanding my portfolio. We're building, with the use of ADUs. And also I'm realizing the power of single family homes, which I'm coming up with a new strategy that I'm calling Swiss Army House.
What is that?
Basically, I mean, just like a Swiss Army knife, to me, a house is just like that. A single family house, while everybody's looking at multifamily thinking, hey, this is the ultimate, asset class. I'm looking at single family. It's everything. All these single families are in front of you. There's more abundant. They're everywhere. Your leverage are better. And people are overlooking all the opportunities you can have with single family. You can have midterm rental. You can have short-term rental. You can have assisted living facilities. You can have sober homes. You can have rehab centers. I mean, it's limitless at this point. As the more I explore this whole co-living model, the more I realize I can identify like a handful of different exits. And so I'm purposely building some of these homes now for that exit so I can pivot at any time, in case some kind of black swan happens again. And that's kind of what I'm doing. It's a lot.
Incredible story, man. And your background, we can all tell how it propelled you to where you are now. And it's really interesting to hear how hard 2020 was on your other businesses, but how great it was to have that rental portfolio, keeping everything afloat. And I feel the same way. I was doing a lot of residential sales as a residential agent, and some of that stuff picked up after COVID. But then after rates went up, boom, right? Like there's always market cycles in real estate investing. There's always market cycles in real estate sales. You got to be aware of those things. They're going to come and you got to be prepared for them. But if you have something like a nice, stable portfolio, everyone needs to rent a single family house. Everyone's got to have a place to live. You'll be okay. So, man, you've got ADUs, you've got short-term rentals, you've got an RV park, you're building spec homes. Why? And you mentioned it a little bit earlier. Your mother has Alzheimer's, right? So, why did her having that and you doing that research? Why did you decide, okay, now I'm going to get into this? And what steps have you taken?
Yeah. So why? The big why is, before I got into this, I started looking for a home for her, and the biggest challenge was finding the right home, right? And also, there's a stigma in my family about like, hey, if you put your mother in a home, you're almost abandoning her. And so I realized like, wow, I have to look into this more. And the more I explored, I'm like, well, it's really not that difficult because it's the majority of the bottleneck is the real estate aspect. I can build those, and then operation. I've owned a lot of businesses. It can't be that much difficult. So I enrolled myself in a program to be certified as an administrator, and I was able to get that through. And I'm like, wow, okay, I think I know how to run this business now. But that being said, I'm not planning on doing operations. I actually only took that course just so I can understand who I can hire or partner with. And so now I have 2 operators that are with right now who are going to effectively run the business on top of the real estate. But yeah, I mean, my biggest why is just really being able to find a home for my mom that I have better control with, and also something that I can build for her with intention that, hey, this is going to be great for everybody else. And also, I just want to be able to understand this business better so I can teach people how to do this as well, and maybe potentially find partners to operate some of the new facilities I'm going to be building in the next few years. So that's really the bigger game here.
Dude, I love what you said about if I build this for mom, it'll be great for everyone. I think everybody should have that mentality when getting into this business. Build for the place you want your mom and dad to be in, or you, where would you want to be? And then you'll build it exactly how it should be, right? Because I think that the nicer the home is, single bedroom, there's so many extra steps you can take and extra little tweaks and things like that to make residents comfortable that I think just makes it the best business model. It's all about value. Are you a Go-Giver fan? Have you read The Go-Giver?
I am a go-giver. I know. I don't know if I read I don't think I read that book, but I know the concept.
Yeah, it's essentially just, hey, the more value you provide to others without thinking of anything in return, the more money you'll get, right? Just naturally that will attract income.
Yeah.
Because you're providing the best product to your clients. And so anyway, think of it like, hey, where should mom be? And your business will explode. I love that you went and got licensed, got certified. When I started out in real estate, I bought 8 apartments and self-managed. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but I learned how to manage the property manager, which I think is exactly what you're saying. Hey, I've taken the course. I know how to manage the operators. You know how to run a business. And so you'll be good to go. So tell me where you're at in the build of it's 7 independent bedrooms, right? Tell me where you're at in the build of that home. Tell us a little about that home.
Yeah, so we have 3 assisted living facilities that we're launching probably as early as next year. But in the first one that I got into is, interestingly enough, I actually bought that home when I first decided, hey, I need to look into this space. I got to find a home. This is even before I got certified, because we flip houses. So I saw this one house. I'm like, wow, this is going to make an awesome assisted living facility for the elderly. And we bought it for $1.6 million. It's worth about $3.5 million once it's done. And so I figured there's a lot of equity here. I probably won't lose on the equity. So there's opportunity for me to at least experiment on this. And I kind of just bought the property without knowing what I was getting into. And that's about a year ago. So I got into there. So we decided to take this one house that was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. And we're cutting it up into 7 bedrooms, 7.5 bathrooms. And we're going to operate it as a private pay model in this area that we're doing this. It's about $10,000 to $12,000 per bedroom per month. So I know the numbers are there for that. And that's the just starting point. And because we're creating these bedrooms with exits on them, so that we can actually take the highest level of care all the way to end of life, hospice. There's even bigger opportunities for that. I think it's about $15,000 to $16,000 for those per month, and it's also in the higher luxury area. So I figured I can attract, more wealthier clients per se. Yeah. So that's one of them, and then 2 other ones that I actually started right now, and we are kind of in licensing stage is what's called ARF. These are a completely different model. It's not the elderly model, but it's for adults from 18 to 59 years old. These are for adults with behavioral, developmental kind of disabilities. And that itself, it doesn't even need to be ADA compliant house. Just rehabbing as a single family, 4 bedrooms, doesn't need any ramps. And each one will probably make about $11,500 to about $11,700 per bedroom per month.
And that's state pay?
That is. We have to go through here in Los Angeles, or California, it's called regional centers. It's where they send you. So you actually don't even have to market for this thing, which is great, Wow.
So, okay. Couple things. So on the home itself, so the 7-bed home, I want the listener to realize something. Alvin is buying a plus $1 million plus house. He's putting a bunch of renovations in it. It's a $3+ million house when he's done with it. And he's going to be able to cash flow on that home to the tune of 70 grand plus gross a month when fully occupied. And so a lot of people have this kind of mindset that I can't pay too much for a house because it's not going to work out. But what's really nice about this model is we find that it kind of scales linearly. Like, yes, your staff are going to cost a little more and the houses cost more the further you go into a wealthier area. But guess what? The rates for residents is also higher. They all kind of scale together. Yes, that price point might be kind of high. You can do everything we just heard here. Cut all the numbers in half, right? Well, payroll may not exactly work out that way, but you could open a home in, rural Virginia and the median rate's still $5-6 grand, but you're only paying, 300 grand for a home and 200 grand for renovations, right? And your staff cost is going to be lower. So there's definitely, it still works in most markets. I do encourage folks to look for higher median household income markets though, and to kind of make sure that they have that as part of their criteria, just to help with the private pay piece. You got to have some minimums there for it to work out. Payroll, there's minimums there. You're always going to have, 16 to 20 grand a month in payroll expenses. So you do have to be above that line. But
yeah, and I actually want to add to that. So a lot of people get stuck with just the, short-sightedness of looking at this business in just in a cash flow situation or cash flow perspective. But, to me, because I'm able to, and I'm pulling a lot of leverages here, because we have our own in-house construction company, we're able to pick up any distressed property to be able to really expand it and have the opportunity to actually purposely build something. So, from a $1.6 million purchase to about $3.5 million valuation, but that's because we're adding a lot of value in it. and most people are stuck with is, they get really stuck in just, hey, are we going to be able to afford the cash flow, right? Are we able to afford the operation? But that's just a matter of really pulling the right leverages to make sure that you can. But on the other side of this, we've got over $1.5 million of equity built in, which is enough cushion for us to think about this in terms of well, even if it doesn't cash flow, we got the equity. Are we actually losing on a, on a return of equity basis? Are we actually losing on a total return on investment? So, when you're investing in real estate or you're investing in any kind of business, you got to look at the overall. You can't just get stuck and be short-sighted on just the cash flow part. So I think the more you own the piece of that pie, the better your leverage is and the more control you might have.
That's an excellent point, Alvin. And I'll add to it again that, hey, you're creating a business, you're creating it from scratch. Most folks we talk to are creating it from scratch in a piece of real estate. You're creating value, right? Yes, there's cash flow is one thing, and then there's the business valuation. Mm-hmm. Now, it's true that just owning one or two homes, the multiple on that business valuation is going to be lower, but as you get more and more and more, the multiple is going to go up and up and up. And pretty soon you can apply 7, 8x, and your total overall business is worth millions. Right. In addition to cash flow you may receive. So a lot of people, and go ahead.
No, and I was going to say, you pointed something really important there, because a lot of people will try one and the numbers don't work on one and they kind of get stuck and stop. Right. But just like every business, it's all about economies of scale. So as you build 2 or 3 more, next thing you know, you're starting to have economies of scale. You start to have leverages, especially if you start to focus on one area at a time. You start spreading that sort of scale in one area. You almost start to control the market a little bit, especially if you're doing private pay, And so there's a bigger strategy involved with just marketing these things and expansion. So you got to have the right strategies in place to really capitalize on opportunity, but also be able to control the market. That's kind of where my head is. And once you start affecting the rent or because I've learned that in just, in my real estate portfolio, as soon as I started having enough property in a certain area, next thing you know, I'm starting to demand the rent a little bit, and one rent affects the other, and you're making, you're starting to sort of create the market yourself, which is really important. But on the other side of that, when you start building these things, I'm also looking for other exits. This is why I was kind of told you about all the other multiple exits, because in case this doesn't work out, I'm already working on other backup plans for it. I'm looking into potentially converting these into a sober living home or some kind of a rehab center. Those would be other options that I can kind of pull that trigger and pivot anytime. So to be a great entrepreneur, I'm always looking for exits so that way I have backup plans. Being a great entrepreneur, we'd be thinking about risk mitigation at all time, and that's what I do the best.
That's awesome, and I'm always thinking about it too. Maybe to a fault. Is there a line there where you're doing too much risk mitigation, or do you think you've mastered that dance? And if so, what's your tip?
Honestly, I don't think there isn't anything about doing too much risk mitigation. I actually, a lot of people say focus on one thing, inch wide, mile deep. I'm a contrarian when it comes to that. A lot of people think about everybody talks about this quote about, jack of all trades, master of none. And people think that diversifying, your I guess what you're chasing is a bad thing, but I actually do the opposite. I've found success by just being diversified. And I will tell you, if I had just focused on one thing, I would have made such a big mistake with that. And that's happened to me once or twice already. Look at COVID. COVID almost wiped me out. And I had 2 or 3 different things happening at the same time. Had I not diversified, had I not done real estate on the side, I would have been completely wiped out. By the way, the quote, jack of all trades is a master of none, that's half of the real quote. The actual full quote says, jack of all trades is a master of none, though oftentimes that's better than a master of one. That's the real quote.
Way to leave that off. Yeah.
That's the real quote. That just tells me hey, I don't have to be focused on one thing, but man, I can do much better when I'm spread out a little bit more. And I think a lot of people take that in the wrong way. Yeah, you should be focusing on a business at a time. I think it's just a matter of making sure you focus until you figure things out. But there's no such thing as just sticking to one thing. I don't believe in just sticking to one thing. Look at like Elon Musk. Like how many businesses that they have? All the successful businessmen, they have multiple businesses, multiple streams of income. But they have mastered how to build each business. That's the difference. I think if you have singular focus on one thing at a time, making sure it's running perfectly, then that's great. But if you're all over the place, that's a completely different thing. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to derail that conversation.
No, that's good. Yeah, you're making me feel better about my shiny object syndrome. I like to learn a lot. I like to do a lot of different things. But right now, for me, just the writing is on the wall that I could do a lot of different things, but they all need to revolve around this industry, the assisted living industry. For me, it's
Yep.
like the tailwinds are there, the tsunami's coming. The data is undeniable. Like anybody who is aligning, and you don't have to go start a residential assisted living home, even
Yep.
though that's what you and I are doing. But you can, if you have any business whatsoever, it could be marketing, it could be real estate agent, it could be a lender, like whatever it is, you should align yourself with this industry, with basically senior care in general, because the demographics is just going to it's going to double the need over the next decade. And like it would be hard to lose, is kind of my point.
Yeah.
Is that what you believe as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm focusing on this right now. It's not my only focus, but I'm focusing on this right now. Like I wouldn't have taken the course for assisted living residential facility for elderly, like the certification, if I wasn't focused, right? But for the next couple of years, this is exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure this out A to Z because I just like the challenge of that. I like tinkering with stuff. I like learning every single part of it because once I've able to master that, then I know at which point do I really want to play in. Do I want to be an operator? I've quickly realized I don't want to be operating the daily on this. So I've figured that out. So I've learned how to diversify that and delegate that a little bit by finding partners for it. But yeah, I think the next 2 years, man, I want to figure out how to scale this. That's my game right now.
That's awesome. Definitely want to have some more conversations with you about that because we're on opposite ends of the country. Maybe we could have some ideas we could share and scale this.
Absolutely.
And what's really cool is like, okay, we have like 30 plus members in our mastermind and we talk all the time. We share everything we know because guess what? Every single person that mastermind could go open 100 10-bed homes and not even make a dent in what's needed now, acquired in the future. So like there's an opportunity for all of us to win, which is kind of one of the most interesting things about this industry. Sorry to interrupt this episode, but if you're listening to this, then you're already an action taker. And that means you are exactly who we built the RAL Room Assisted Living Mastermind for. If you're ready to unlock financial freedom by launching your own residential assisted living home, our community of like-minded entrepreneurs and industry experts will give you the exact steps to make that happen. From licensing to acquiring a home to funding your home to scaling to dozens of homes, we've got you covered. We don't just offer guidance, we provide you with the roadmap, the resources, and the launch pad for your success. And the best part? The investment in yourself today will pay you back many times over, giving you freedom, fulfillment, and financial success in the most incredibly rewarding opportunity in real estate. Ready to dive in? Check out theralroom.com and join us today. That's the RALroom.com. Hope to see you soon. Now back to the episode. So I want to ask you a couple questions. Maybe they're a little bit selfish to kind of get an idea of how your brain works and how you approach some of these things. For the 7-bed RCFE, did you know, putting it under contract and purchasing that home, that it would be licensable for assisted living? Or is that something you kind of figured out after the fact? Like, how did that shake out?
Yeah, I mean, I did a little bit of initial thought before that. So, we bought it anyway because it was such a great deal regardless. So I had all these different exits. But as we were getting permits for it, I learned that, here in California, we're maxed out at 6 beds. So unless we start getting what's called, what do you call it? Special use permits. Yeah. What's that stand for again? Yeah, sorry, I'm blanking out. But yeah, so it's basically you can get CUP, which is another play. We can actually expand this. Right now, we bought it for 1.6, 3.5 million exit, but it sits on a 14,000 square foot lot, which I can actually expand this thing. So we do have plans in place to expand it, but that requires conditional use permit. We'll have to upgrade the plumbing. We'll have to make, I can potentially expand this up to 12 if I wanted to. But we're taking stages right now. We're going to do it this way. But to answer your question in the beginning, I didn't really have a clear plan but I knew I can figure it out by the time it's done. And so, yeah. So I think right now we're at the point where we're probably gonna get it to licensing. I mean, we haven't even applied for licensing because we're still at the build stage with the very last end of it. We have our drywalls up, we got plumbing in place. So I would say maybe in 2 months we can start applying for the license, which will take another 8 months. I believe 6 to 8 months from what I hear. That's how long it's taking now to get licensing. So in the meantime, like that's a part I gotta figure out. Like, because of my short-term rental background, I can probably get that short-term rental in the interim to kind of reduce some of the cost.
Bridge the gap. Yeah.
Bridge the gap. And that's my whole point about having multiple exits, so that way you can have options as you're moving, things around. Yeah. Sorry. Did I answer that question?
Yeah. Yes. Well, okay. Now we're going to go to the next one. So this is something that is, maybe this is just a limiting belief of mine. Or maybe just it's a lack of understanding. So, until now I've been focused on assisted living, but I've seen a couple of, disability adult care type homes pop up on my radar. And I'm like, this is also just as interesting. It seems like a very similar model. I just don't know enough about it, and I don't know what the risks are associated with that. Can the state turn off pay? Like we got burned in Arizona with a sober living home where all of a sudden the state turned off all pay. It's been a year and a half where basically they're not funding that. And that was the intent of the home we had just bought. It was like right after we bought it that they just out of the blue, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, is that applicable here? Or is the kind of adults with disabilities or behavioral, is that a more protected space where it would be hard for them to do something like that? And therefore it's really not risky. I'm curious what your thoughts are, having explored what you've explored so far.
So that space is actually a higher level of care. It's a higher barrier of entry as well. Over here in at least the areas that we're operating in, you can't have, with an RCFE, which is the elderly, you can have one next to each other, right? But with this space, the 18 to 59-year-old, they have to be at the very least 300 feet apart. So there's a limit because they don't want concentration. It's also a higher level of care in a sense where they don't just award you the type of residence right away. You almost have to start at the lower tier. But the opportunity is there. I was talking to my partner who's going to be operating this with me. He said that he had just bought a property who has a resident in there who is now 60 years old, could actually be labeled and put into the elderly already. But this resident has been in that house since she was 8 years old. So I think the opportunity is like, man, talk about occupancy rate here. If you have one resident and they're going to live a lot longer, they can be in this home forever. So I think for what you're dealing with is you're concerned about getting cut off because you have one exit. And this is why I was talking about earlier. About the way I think is I'm always thinking about alternate exits. Worst case scenario, I can sell this house. I can sell it, right? And then, or I can master lease it to somebody else. Or I can sell it, or I can rent it out as a long-term rental, short-term rental. I can do all of those things. So that part doesn't concern me. That's just how my mindset is because I've already mitigated those risks at the beginning.
That's such a good point. Such a good point. Thank you for breaking down my limiting belief there. Yeah, and it's an interesting space, and they need a home too, right? A lot of adults with disabilities, behavioral issues, they need a place too. They need a nice, safe environment. They may need nurses on staff, and you can provide that space for them, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And the model is not that much different. And the beauty of it is they're ambulatory. So, most of the time, some of them are actually have things to do in the daytime. They're out of the house. They're actually not even your responsibility when they're outside of the house. So, and the homes they don't need to be ADA compliant because they're ambulatory patients or residents. So you don't need ramps. You don't need curbless showers.
Yeah.
You don't need all that. So worst case scenario, like it doesn't work out, you can rent it out as a normal rental.
And I assume that even at the lowest level of care, you still need 24/7 staffing.
It's 24/7 staffing, just like all the other ones. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I got a few questions we normally ask, but you're still getting into the industry on the operations side, just like we are, right? We've done a lot of lease to operator. We partnered on minority partnered on a couple of operations, so we're still foraying in ourselves. But I think you can answer these questions kind of from an entrepreneur or real estate entrepreneur perspective.
Sure.
So, what can you share? One or two of your biggest lessons learned from being a real estate entrepreneur? I know that's pretty broad. Normally I would ask in the assisted living industry, but what have you learned over the past few years doing ADUs, STRs, building, maybe a big mistake or two that
That's a big question, man.
is,
Like my
yeah.
mind is kind of going all over the place because there's so many topics I can talk about. But the biggest lesson is I wish I've done this sooner. I wish I've done the value add sooner because I think the value add play is the key to all of this. One of the things to mitigate the risk on the valuation side is we'll buy like two bedroom houses and expand them. That way we're very protected in terms of equity. And that just allows us to create so much cushion that limits the risk for us. So that's one that I've discovered. Mistakes have been, I probably won't ever buy anything turnkey anymore. Just because when you buy something turnkey is, you're actually increasing your risk. Thinner margin. And then the other part of it is I like to start from scratch. I'd rather do it that way just because I have more control. And just like before, like I bought businesses where I didn't know it comes with baggage. You kind of explore certain things and all of a sudden it comes with baggage and you're like, man, I paid too much for this. And this is why I'd rather just start from scratch. So I have better, control about where things are, especially in California, with the RCFE or ARF, when you buy a business, you don't know what it comes with. And sometimes you still need to get the license anyway. So why are you needing to buy this business along with the real estate when you're having to start all over anyway? So, sure, there's a transition period, but you almost have to do your due diligence to see if that's worth it. But yeah, I mean, those are just high level things that I can think about from an operational standpoint. Like I said, like I don't have the operational experience yet, but that's where I know like finding the right operator to partner with is key. And so, I have partners who have had at least 7 to 8 years of experience in this. And so those are the ones that I'm going to be partnering with. And my plan of attack with them is basically taking where they're currently operating at and scaling from there. Like not jumping from one area at a time, because, the way I look at how these things should play out is if you have concentration in a certain area, you start to control it and you start to understand that market a little bit more. And so I would rather partner with an operator that has experience in a certain area and just expand, spread the opportunity that way.
And how does that partnership look like? Because we get a lot of folks who do want to form partnerships. Is that an equity partner or is that a licensed care home operator, like a kind of a nurse manager that you pay in a salary? Like what does that look like?
Right now, I'm trying to figure that out because I guess it depends on the level of experience that operator has. If it's someone who can be at a director level, my partner right now, he already runs five or six homes in the area. So he's got that experience. So I'm looking at more strategic partner with him. So he's my current model with him. He's at 50% of, we're both 50-50 on the operation side. And on the real estate side, he gets basically phantom equity on it. I own the real estate, but he gets phantom equity. If we ever exit, I'll give him a certain amount or percentage of the equity on the real estate when it's sold.
I like that. For our listeners, we talked about value add and Alvin just mentioned phantom equity. Alvin, you want to give us your definition of both? And I'm a huge fan.
Phantom equity is basically you invest your time into the business so they can earn that equity. It's almost like putting the sweat equity there. It minimizes your risk just in case, you partner with somebody and you give equity right away. 2 months down the line, decide, hey, this is not working out, and they have access to the equity. Well, phantom equity, it's more about, we put like metrics in place, like, hey, this needs to be in operation for 2 or 3 years for that to kick in. That will give you enough time to basically see if there's an alignment there. But also, but that's just on the real estate side. To me, for the operation and business side, they'll get that right away. They get the 50% right away or whatever, 30 to 50, for a director level. But if we were to find an operator, it depends on that level of experience there. I think it's good to give some kind of incentive just because you want your team to have a sense of ownership. And that's the real value there. In my opinion, anyway, you guys as operators and business owners, you can devise this however you want. But to me, I'm a big believer in giving value to other people and really just giving them ownership in some sense of it, because they won't work as hard unless they feel like they have some form of equity or ownership on it. That's just how it works.
some sort of shared incentive where everybody wins together. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
It's a much better model than just like, I'm just going to pay you and whatever happens, happens. Well, that's not very incentivizing, right? That's something I've never understood, like about property management. Like, okay, I got to pay you every time I place a new tenant. That doesn't make sense. Like, no, you should only get paid when there's a tenant in there. I'm not paying a turnover fee. So I don't, I've negotiated with property managers, like I'm only paying you on a percentage of what the rent is. So if it stays full, you get paid more. If it doesn't, you get paid less.
Yep.
I think that aligned incentives are super important. I see a lot of, especially in the Phoenix metro area. Yeah, you can hire a manager. It's $5,000 a month. I'm like, well, that doesn't incentivize them to keep the home full. I don't fully understand that model, and I just can't picture myself subscribing to that. But okay, we got to wrap this up, even though I would love to chat with you for, the rest of the evening, but I want to be respectful of your time. With your, you have a incredible business and real estate background. What do you see the assisted living industry or model evolving to and growing over the next 5 to 10 years? What do you picture?
That's an interesting question. It's really hard to predict where this is going to go. I do see that there's a lot of eyes on this now. I think the biggest bottleneck is getting the license in place. And there's probably going to be a lot more competition, I would imagine. The biggest bottleneck right now, too, is just the financing end. It's so early on the takeout. I think Alex and I think maybe, I think I was in one of your meetups one day, and I asked that question. I threw in that question about like, hey, what are you guys doing on the takeout loans, on the long-term takeout loans? So I think there's a lot of opportunities in the lending aspect of this as well, outside of just the operation. If someone can figure out how to be a niche lender on this space, I think they're gonna be making a lot of money. In fact, that's where my head is going. Is like, if I can't find a lender soon, I might just build a fund to lend for these types of homes.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you more about that. You're 100% right. It's lacking. You basically have some SB opportunities, which can sometimes be tough to get into, especially first timers, and there's some DSCR, but then there's most lenders are like, what the heck is assisted living? And no, we don't want to be a part of that business. And you got to explain it's just the real estate. Yeah, it's a whole rigmarole. You're right. It doesn't exist until your portfolio is huge, until you get those other options. So, okay.
I do think this is an opportunity that's here to stay. Just to answer that question, it's an opportunity that's here to stay. Whether you stay in the elderly or even the 18 to 59 years old, I mean, it's all, progressively, they're all going to end up in the RCFE or the elderly side anyway. So I think there's a massive opportunity here.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. So Alvin, before we go, unless you've already mentioned it, what's something right now, it could be anything, it doesn't have to be real estate or assisted living. What's something right now you're working on that you're passionate about?
Honestly, like the biggest thing I'm passionate about is I'm doing all this because my kids are watching. And it's the best way to teach our kids. Our kids learn by observation. Me as a dad, it's hard sometimes. You can't force education down your kids' throats, or else they won't listen and they won't, they'll resent you potentially. And so I'm chasing after all these things because my kids are watching. And so the biggest thing I'm passionate about right now is just teaching them how to do things because they still see their dad doing all these hard things on purpose. And that's what I'm passionate about, man.
How old are your kids?
I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. And so I actually bring them to all my meetups. Really? And it's their opportunity to like learn, and one thing that we do is like, I don't give them any allowances. They almost have to earn everything that they want to have. Like, they want to buy some video games. I'm like, hey, do you have any money for this? They're like, nope. Well, and then they start, well, how do I earn? I go, well, if you go to my meetups, take notes, and whatever you can give back, and like take notes and, tell me what you've learned and be specific about what you learned about it. I'll give you money for each one. And so they're there. They think they're earning money for whatever games they have, but they're actually learning, So I'm incentivizing them to do certain things. I gave my son Rich Dad Poor Dad when he turned 14. And right now he's learning the idea of asset versus liabilities. And like a couple of weeks ago, he's like, Dad, I just got a $250 gift for my birthday. I want to buy some stocks. And I'm like, dude, it's working. It's working. Yeah. So
I'm gonna write this one down. My kids are 4 and 7, so we're getting to that age where I'm gonna be able to do some of this too, dude. That's really awesome to hear.
Yeah, that's really what I'm doing right now. Like purposely, like you got to have your big why, right? Everybody asks about this with big why. My big why is like figuring out how to teach my kids certain things, because that's going to be nonstop for me. And if I'm educating other people, I'm only going to be better at it by the time they're able to receive or they're willing to receive information. So my goal is to be a better teacher for my kids. I can't do that if I'm not practicing. This is why I'm learning these things now.
Dude, that's powerful. That's so powerful. And it's hard to put in words, and you did an excellent job of stating that. And me and Alex and Luke, we're all very devoted family men as well. So, but it's part of why we do it, right? And
Yep.
I know it's cliche to say, and everybody's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But it is. It's so important, and it is important to get them involved because that ultimately that's what it's all for.
Yeah, and one last thing, I mean, not to kind of, like everything, that's why I do these recorded podcasts, is because like these are basically, memories and things that I can potentially share with them when they're older, because you never know, never know when time comes. I have a brother who is 46 years old. He passed away from cancer last year. And, sometimes your time just comes and he never had the opportunity to teach his kids, and they never got to see him succeed. They never saw his, what he was doing day to day. And so right now I'm intentionally taking recording of everything I'm doing right now. So that way, if something were to happen to me tomorrow, there's records of me and what I've done, and they know what I'm doing for them.
Wow. I have never looked at a podcast or content creation in that way before, and I'm never going to be able to think of it differently again.
Well, that's my gift to you then.
Yes, Alvin, thank you. Really, seriously, man, I've never thought about that. That's never crossed my mind, and that's you're completely right. I mean, any day your time could come. It could be today, it could be tomorrow. Hopefully not, right? Hopefully we'll chat with you next week. But yeah, dude, that's incredible. So maybe a big takeaway here is say yes to more content creation, say yes to more podcasts. Get what you're doing out there for your kids. It's a record, right? And it'll be there forever. Dude, that's insightful. Appreciate that. So Alvin, now that you've dropped that amazing bomb on us at the end of the episode here, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
I've been kind of on social media for the last year. That's the challenge I was given by a friend of mine. He's like, man, you got so much good stuff that's roaming around your head. Like, you got to let this out. So I'm on social media. You can find him at Alvinized, ALVINIZED. I'm all over social media. So, but yeah, that's the best way to kind of find me, I guess.
Dude, Alvin, thanks for joining us today and sharing your insights and sharing your just kick-ass thoughts on especially the family piece and content creation for your legacy. It's been a pleasure learning from your experience, and I can't wait to have you back on sometime.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a raving 5-star review. And a quick review helps more listeners find the show and more seniors get the exceptional care they deserve.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And just so you know, we have prepared some free resources for you to help you succeed in residential assisted living in addition to this podcast. Head over to theralroom.com, that is theralroom.com, to download our free 10-step guide to launch your first or next residential assisted living home, or our 10 reasons to passively invest in residential assisted living ebooks.
And if you're ready to take the next step and make real moves in the RAL industry, join us in the RAL Room Mastermind. It is an exclusive community where we deep dive into everything you need to launch and grow your own residential assisted living business. You'll get access to recorded courses, live calls with industry experts, a RAL calculator, resources and tools, like-minded entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and an expert networking community to help you along your journey.
Be sure to join us next time on the RAL Room Podcast as we continue to explore the world of residential assisted living with more great guests. See you then.